Well, welcome everybody as people log in. So let's give it a minute or two, and then we will start with our special guests. So we're delighted that you're joining us. So we'll start in about a minute. All right, Rachel, why don't we start? So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Mark Blattner. I'm the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland. And you are in for a real treat this afternoon or late evening in Dubai. We are going to be joined today by Consul General Ilan Starosta, who is the first ever Consul General in the country of Dubai. And just a quick little background. Ilan has been with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for over 20 years. He has served in Brazil at the consulate in Brazil. He was the ambassador of Israel in Argentina. He was also stationed here in Washington, D.C. as the Deputy Director of Public Affairs. And now he is in Dubai. We welcome you, Ilan. So thank you for joining us. And I also want to welcome Matan Zamir, who is the Deputy Consul General in San Francisco. Many of you have seen him before, and he's spoken to our community many times. So Matan, it's nice to see you as well. Before we begin, I just want to encourage anybody who has questions to please use the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. We'll be taking some questions. The format's going to be Matan is going to have a conversation with Ilan, ask some questions. And then as the conversation goes, please fill in the Q&A and we'll ask some follow-up questions as the days goes forward. So I'm going to turn off my screen so we can focus on the two of you. And welcome. And Matan, let me turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And I want to also say thank you to Bob and to Rachel from the Federation for hosting this event on the occasion of Israel's Independence Day. It's going to happen this coming Wednesday, 73rd. And just as you said in the invitation, this is a great opportunity to have an insider's look into the Abraham Accords and the bilateral relations between the UAE and Israel. So we have no better candidate than the actual first Consul General of Israel to Dubai, to the United Arab Emirates. Ilan, thank you for joining us all the way 11 p.m. Dubai time. And I want to start by thanking you and asking you to describe us the background. So a little bit of the history before the Abraham Accords. Some of us know that there were some type of bilateral relations between UAE and Israel. A lot of it happened behind the stage, and a lot of it you cannot get into specifics. But what can you tell us about the relationship that led to the signing of the Abraham Accords?
You know, Israel has had relations with many countries that we don't have diplomatic relations for a long time. We never were at war with the Emirates. We never at war with any country in the Gulf, for that matter. So we kept these relationships under, a certain level of secrecy, you could say, and not too secret enough for the New York Times to publish, what we had in Bahrain with all the details and including the names of the head of missions there, but we didn't have that in the Emirates. But we had all the time for years, people coming back and forth and doing mainly business. Of course, we couldn't do business with people here in the Emirates, so the Israelis would sign contracts saying that you're not allowed to do any business with Israel, but they would still do the business, with different companies, and we found a way. And until the Abraham Accords, which changed completely the outview, and I think it's going to change the whole region as well.
And talking about the Abraham Accords and getting into more specifics, what were the immediate factors that led to the signing of the Abraham Accords, and how the United States played a role in the timing of signing the agreements?
Again, as I told you before, that as you asked rightly so, we had this relationship for many, many years, but it was not formal and it was not open. And I think the the actual help and initiative of the United States government to push for this agreement was very significant, and it's something that we thank the American government for that. We wish that they could do that for the Palestinians, and one day we reach an agreement with the Palestinians. Unfortunately, we're not that close to them either. But the Emirates government, which is a very pro-West and pro most, let's say, of our values, they were open to it. And when the Sheikh decided, here the decision is respected, so everybody went. And I think it fits with the policy they're having of tolerance, and it's really nice to see how this country, they have, first of all, they have analysis. They look forward 10, 20, 13 years. They have a plan for 2050. And they see where the world is going. They see that the oil is going to end someday, and not so soon as most people think, but they will end. So they decided to turn around and invest in things that do bring a future for their people, like technology, innovation, food security. So Israel was a perfect partner, as well as the United States, to develop this sort of thing. So it was really a rational decision by the leadership of this country, helped a little bit by the United States government, and of course the willingness of the Israeli government, as always has been, to reach out to peace anywhere that we can. If it's cold peace or warm peace, doesn't matter. As long as there's no war, we're happy. So it was a combination of all these factors that actually brought, and we were quite surprised, I have to tell you, the people that worked in this area. I worked before in the department that takes care of this area, so I was pretty much involved in what was happening. And we were surprised when the accords were announced, and thankful too, because as I said before, it's a really game changer what's happening here.
I wish we in Israel could plan for 2025, not to talk about 2050. But one more follow-up question. How much was the Iranian issue that's very much high on the international agenda these days? How much the Iranian aggression in the region was a factor, an element in signing the agreements?
It was a factor. Everybody is afraid of Iran in the region and outside the region. I can tell you, I served before in Argentina, and Argentina was also afraid of the Iranians, and all the people involved in the bomb attacks in Argentina, 92, 94, are still in the most wanted list of the Interpol. And Iran doesn't have an ambassador in Argentina. When I served there, they have a chargé d'affaires, so the level of relations is very low. But on the other hand, you have just in Dubai, you have almost 500,000 Iranians living here. And Iran does a lot of business with Dubai. Of course, business that are outside the list that the State Department puts out and the Treasury Department puts out. So they have a love and hate relationship with the Iranians. They're afraid of the Iranians, but on the other hand, they make a lot of money out of the Iranians. So it was not the main factor, actually. The main factor was just, a geopolitical analysis that they had, that they have to align themselves more to the West. And they're building now, the government is building a big building in Abu Dhabi that's going to be housing a church, a synagogue, and a mosque in the same place, all financed by the government. They have a tolerance, they have a minister for tolerance. They have a ministry that all they do is to make sure that people have freedom to, exercise whatever religion you want. All the women here have high positions in government. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like any other country, but if I compare the number of women in the government here and the number in other countries, they're not falling behind too long. And so I think all of this contributed to the decision, but they are afraid of Iran. But then who isn't? So it's nothing special about that.
Right. So now let's go forward in time. The Abraham Accords were signed. And you've mentioned before how we in Israel have some peace agreements that are considered warmer and some that are considered colder. And with UAE, people, since day one, this was described as a very warm peace and a very warm relationship. Is that the actual situation on the ground?
Yes, doubtless. And it was also a surprise for me because I didn't expect that kind of, it's really amazing. First of all, since the accords up to now, there's about 150,000 Israelis visited the Emirates. It's like, you would go, and then COVID stopped all this because we locked the airports and closed. But until this moment, you would go to the, Dubai Mall, which is the biggest mall in the city of Dubai, and you would see people doing a minyan, praying, and nobody would mind. I was like, what is this? I mean, people praying with talitot and tefillin, and people just, give a look, not very surprised, and go forward. So, and I see, I have a small young daughter. She goes to the kindergarten. So in the beginning, we were like afraid to say that, no, Israeli diplomats, but we can't really hide, So I said, well, we are Israelis. Okay. Nobody, and it's like, I did Seder Pesach, what, 10 days ago. When was the Seder? With some Israeli friends and some Emirati friends that ask people who are Muslim, they're religious, they keep, halal, and they ask to join the Seder with us because they were just curious. So people are very, very warm, and okay, so you're Jewish. It doesn't really matter to anybody. If you're Jewish, Israeli, they really welcome for who you are, and they want to push this relationship further.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I hope that we can say the same thing on the way us in Israel, we welcome the Israeli ambassador and the Emirati team. I just saw today on his Twitter, it's Ambassador Muhammad Al Khadja. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Khadja,
Going
yes.
to my favorite falafel place in Jerusalem, and I feel free to give him a commercial, Falafel Shlomo in Jerusalem, and eating falafel. So I think it goes both ways, right? The people to people, the welcome, right? The warm welcome that Israelis are, like you said, described in Dubai and in the Emirates, and the way that we welcome Emiratis in Israel is very warm.
Yes, it is. And it's very, last week I participated in an event of an Israeli NGO that they gather young people from all over the Gulf and just put them together and do some activities together. So there were people from the Emirates, there were people from Saudi Arabia, there were people from Morocco, there were people from Bahrain and Qatar, and all together. And there was one specific, Israeli young woman that she said they were in the moment sharing their experiences after they spent a week here. And she said, almost crying, and also I'd almost cried, because she said, I'm used to when I see an Arab on the streets of Tel Aviv, if I'm walking and I see somebody dressed with a keffiyeh, the scarf on the head, etc., I'm afraid. I'm afraid because I fear that, that this guy is might be carrying a bomb or something. And after a week here, I don't have that fear anymore. And she said, I wished that I could get this back home and walk in an Arab city, Nazareth. I don't know. She didn't mention Nazareth, but she mentioned other, and not feel afraid. And that was the whole point of this gathering of young people. And it was amazing. You see people, religious young women with the headscarf and talking about how they learn about Judaism and stuff. And this is happening here now. It's really, really, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come here instead of, because I felt like it's history. We're making really history. And if this project succeeds, and I believe, we have all the reasons to succeed, this is going to spread like the virus, like COVID. And this is, and if this continues, we're going to have, relations with Saudi Arabia. We're going to have relations with other countries in the area. And inshallah, as they say, with the Palestinians as well. It's really a game changer.
Yeah, I meant that. And I will not ask you how many times a day you pinch yourself, because it sounds even the way you describe it, but the situation on the ground sounds almost unbelievable. If we take ourselves back exactly 1 year ago, before this whole thing started, this wave of peace agreement, the situation today is a dream compared to then.
Yeah,
And I want to just remind everybody to use the Q&A feature and submit questions so we can ask Ilan. I want to jump into talk about technology. Both the United Emirates and Israel is considered a technological space, science, superpowers, not only in the region, in the Middle East, but globally. Can you say a few words about the partnership on these levels? And maybe something that has to do with COVID, because we've been reading about some mutual COVID-related partnerships.
yeah. Listen, there's partnerships now going on in every field that you can think of. The Emirates also have, a good structure in science. I have to remind you, they participated in the space program that brought craft to Mars, and now they have a woman, the first Arab woman astronaut that is going to join NASA program, and they have many companies here, but they know that, as we know, that the only way that you can, enhance your capabilities is open yourself to cooperation, international cooperation. That's what we did in Israel. And in Israel, we've been open to cooperating with our friends and our partners for many years. So they understand that we are the partners. So that it's incredible what's happening. We can't even follow. Most Israeli hospitals are opening here branches. Tel HaShomer is opening a branch. Ichilov is opening a branch. And altogether, last week, I was in an opening of a hospital of high pressure therapy of a professor from Ichilov that developed a very specific technique. And the hospital, a whole hospital, was open in Dubai. It's like, and I was there sitting and listening. I like I said, pinching myself. But it's unbelievable. This morning, I was in a ceremony of Emirates, the biggest Arabic airline in the world, opening a kosher, food packaging. They're gonna cook like 4,000 kosher meals a day. And I said, what do you mean 4,000 meals a day? I mean, how many flights do you have to Israel? He says, no, this is not for Israel. We're going to compete with all the companies in Europe and in the United States providing high quality kosher food. And they invested, tens of millions of dollars in building this facility full of rabbis and people doing the kashrut. And I'm like, again, I said, this is really, it's amazing. Like I'm dreaming. And they said, no, this is good business. We want to be the best. And since we're opening lines everywhere, we're going to have a lot of Jews flying, Jews that eat kosher. So we open a kosher facility. But it's, and every day I'm seeing and pushing for this kind of thing. Venture capital firms in Israel, I personally know of 3. Many we don't know about. They even, because there's so many people going back and forth that we don't keep track. It's really a new reality, really new reality.
Yeah. Speaking of kosher food, can you tell us a few words about the local Jewish community in Dubai?
Well, Jewish community is it's very small. Most expats. There's no Emirati citizens who are Jews. Unlike other Arab countries, here the Jews only came when they started opening, 25, 30 years ago. But there's already 2 communities. One is Chabad and the other one is not. And so even that, they became very Jewish. So, fighting each other and having different synagogues. So there's no synagogue per se. They're going to start now. They just got land from the government of Dubai, and they're going to start building a synagogue. So people, they hired a house, a villa, a big villa, and they have services there. In the past 10 months, because of COVID, they don't have services, so they do everything online or with Zoom. But it's a very loud community, and they're very active in they coming out of the closet as well. I mean, this agreements also let them feel much more, proud of their Jewishness, and they dare to come out, and it's okay. And nobody really, okay, so you're Jewish. So it's a very interesting community. You have Chabad, you have Reform, you have Orthodox, and they like any other country, they fight each other over the kashrut and who should be. But I think that's normal. If the Jews are already starting to come out and fight between themselves, that's
We have to live up to our reputation.
Yes.
So one more question, and then because I see questions popping up on the Q&A, one more thing that I'm curious is perhaps to hear from you. You've been there for 2 months. So one event, one experience, one meeting, something that sticked with you that is the most significant pillar event of the first 2 months of your posting there.
I think the fact that, 2 families came and asked to join me in the Seder Pesach was really, really surprising, because this is one, you can expect the people who came are businessmen that do a lot of business with Israel. But one thing is to do business with Israel as any other country. Another thing is to come and say, listen, I know that it's Passover and you're doing so that I'm really curious to see, what is this? And it was a nice thing. And the other thing that there's one guy, very, very rich family, very powerful family. And I came to see him. He does a lot of business with Israel, has done in the past. I know him from before. And one day I come to the office, unannounced, and I came to this chief of staff and says, listen, I really need to talk to Muhammad. And he says, no, Muhammad is in a class. I said, I really need to talk to him. So he says, okay, so we'll let you in. I go in, and the guy is watching, channel 12 in Hebrew, and talking to his Hebrew teacher. And I said, Muhammad, what is this? I mean, and then he turns and says to teacher, and he says, I have to learn Hebrew. I mean, we're here, I'm doing so much business with him. This is a guy that doesn't really need him. I mean, the guy is really one of the most powerful families in Dubai. He wants to learn Hebrew. He wants to know what's happening in Israel. He wants to see the news and be able to understand. And we have, since, he invited me to his majlis, once a week he has his friends, like in a tent, because they Bedouins after all, so they go back. And I'm sitting there, Israeli diplomat with all those guys. And I felt welcome, really welcome. They were welcoming them in their, in their culture and their lives. And I think this kind of things really, besides all the diplomatic, pragmatic stuff that we think, they're interested in doing, I think they do have an interest in really getting to know us and to develop this relationship. So it feels good, really feels good.
I mean, I love San Francisco, but I am jealous because it sounds like an amazing place to be posted in. Thank you. I'll just say on my behalf, and I'm Mark, please join us, because I know that there have been questions on the chat. So please take it from here.
All right, Ilan, thank you. Matan, thank you very much for opening this up. So I'm going to run through some questions that have come through and ask you some others, and we encourage people to add to the Q&A. Ilan, just to go back for a second, you talked about the kashrut company. What's the name of the kashrut company you were talking about?
It's an Emirates airline.
Okay.
The Emirates itself, they have a plant to provide, food for their flights. So they open up another company next to, this normal company they have that provides kosher food for the flights. Just it's an Emirate sublet company, but it's really, it's amazing. And I imagine you're going to hear from them in the United States too, because when they do something, they do it big, and so. And they invested a lot of money, and so I guess they're going to break the market very soon.
All right, well, we'll find out. Okay, and hopefully the food will be delicious. We'll see. So, do you feel, you were talking about the interchange of Israelis going to Dubai and Emiratis coming to Israel. Do you feel like there's a desire amongst the people to develop relationships, people to people, not just business person to business person?
Yes, definitely, definitely. I think that, first of all, as I said before, there have been already lots of personal relationship between mostly businessmen, but also in think tanks. There were think tanks both in Dubai and Abu Dhabi that had relations with the Israeli think tanks before the Accords. But now everything is open. I mean, in 10 days, the two vice presidents of Hebrew University are coming, to Dubai, and I'm preparing a schedule for them. One of them was our Director General, Yossi Gal. So he's a friend, and I have this interest in helping him because he's a good friend. But and it's amazing. I called the government, Ministry of Education. I said, people from Hebrew University come. Yes, of course. We'll receive them. We'll give them good, bring them over. And we were actually invited to open a university in Dubai. The body that regulates the school system and says, please bring. They asked me, not I asked them. I said, we want students to come here from Israel, and we want our students to go to Israel. So help us out. The question is doubtless. I imagine, I haven't yet found this, but I imagine that some people do not really like the idea of this peace process with Israel. I haven't found one yet, not one.
Okay.
So it's really, it is amazing. It is amazing.
Well, on that note, just curious, there are people who may be on edge about the agreement. What's this really mean? Is this real? Is it not real? How do you encourage that positive discussion to say, look, this is something that, something we have to grab onto? I mean, someone could say it's moving very quickly, the relationship and what's been developed. But how do you get everybody to buy in to say this is a good thing for both Israel and the Arab nation?
Well, I'm here. I don't go back home and try to discuss with people. In Israel, it's like a national hobby to discuss. So here, I don't think there's a discussion. You have also to put things in perspective. The system here, it's not like we used to. It's not that you have different governments with different policies. It's a monarchy. You have a sheikh, and he makes a decision. So once the decision was taken, that's it. Everybody falls in line, and nobody really dares to go out of line here. And they all have this admiration for the leadership here because they right. I mean, what they did here in 50 years, it's amazing. I have a friend that took me to his grandparents' house in the creek. It's the old neighborhood of Dubai, and you see houses built with mud, and you think this is your grandfather's house, and now he's the vice president of one of the biggest logistic companies of ports and in the world. I mean, it's not just Abu Dhabi. Half of Indian and Africa, and the port of London belongs to this company, like a multinational company. And you're talking about two generations. So I feel that this is much. It's close to the history of the states, and it's close to the history of Israel too. I mean, people coming with nothing, and just whatever methodology they're using, they built this beautiful country, and I feel enthusiastic about it. I want to join the efforts to continue building it together with Israel.
Can you talk a little bit about which technologies the Emiratis and the Israelis are most heavily interested in and working together on?
Well, first of all, security, which unfortunately by act of God, we have to have a very high technology, and we do. So we're sharing this technology with them and sharing also development of this technology. And we're building lots of things together. And then there comes everything that's connected to innovation in the fields of food security. They really, really worried because over 90% of their food they consume here, it's imported. So they want to be more independent in this field. And again, Israel in this field, we are very good. I mean, we are very good in agricultural technology. So we're doing a lot of this. Health, I mean, in general, healthcare. They know that we're good. They also good, but they know that together we can be better. So we're investing a lot of that. And other than that, in cyber think tank, we did the first event ever of cyber, a week of cyber, of talks, of etc. They were joining by the government of Dubai and the government of Israel. This was last week, like, sharing secrets, sharing technology. And so this is, but mainly it's technology in food security and cyber and fintech. Those are the ones that are now coming up. But I want to do more. I want to do much more.
Solar, wind, those kind of things as well.
Everything, yes.
Yes.
They have lots of technology already. It's not that we're coming to save the world. I mean, Israelis, we have this big ego. We think that we are Superman, etc. They are Superman too. I mean, they have here a big infrastructure. It functions differently than our model, and it's much more, difficult to move in. But they have achievements because they invested. But we are smaller, and there's a word in Hebrew, mamzerim. We are, we sneak out and we can do things differently. And I think that's the idea, to work together to get, together it works better.
Okay, thank you. It's been reported in textbooks, student textbooks in the UAE, that Israel's been blacked out. Will that be changing with the Abraham Accord?
I haven't seen that, I have to tell you. And we have now, since the Accords, in 6 months, they managed to hire Israeli teachers, professors. There's a lot of faculties here that Israel is teaching, and even before the agreement. So I didn't see this kind of behavior. No.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk about the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, the BDS movement, and their views of the Abraham Accords. And other than, countries saying that, Dubai is not a democracy and Israel has its own challenges with its political system, how do you contradict or confront those BDS supporters who are against this and also against the state of Israel moving forward?
First of all, and in general, I also served, I was Minister of Public Diplomacy in Washington. I think the term of BDS is more relevant to us Jews and Israelis than it is for most people. I mean, I really don't put too much, danger in the BDS movement. Okay, so you don't think that Israel has a right to exist? Okay, you're welcome to have your opinion. It doesn't, all this effort that the Palestinians have done trying to delegitimize, the right of Israel to exist, doesn't, I won't say that it doesn't bother me, it pisses me off, but it doesn't really move anything. I mean, we'll continue to exist as the state of Israel, as a Jewish people, if they want it or not. So I'm not really, the damage done economically, in economic terms, to the state of Israel by this movement is really negligent. I haven't, I don't worry about this. I do worry about other issues that I think are more important than that, than the distancing of the word Jewry of the state of Israel. That I think is a real threat, not the BDS movement. I haven't found any, and if people say, you don't have a right to exist, okay, I can sit down, talk to you, we can agree, we can disagree, and then that's fine. No hard feelings.
Since you brought up your time in DC, somebody wanted to know, what lessons could the United States learn that we might use to create positive conversations within our own Congress?
I'm not going to talk about internal politics in the States, but I think, overall, I think you have a solid system. I think that I'm a big admirer of the American way of doing things. I think that, so, but no system is perfect. not the American, not the Israeli, not the Emirates. We all have, our good points and bad points. But I think that overall, if you look at democracies in the world today, I think, again, it's not the perfect system, but I don't see any better system than that. So we got to stick with that.
So let's change a little bit. What are your concerns or the concerns around security with so many Israelis traveling to the UAE, and especially with Iran threatening retaliation for the recent alleged Israeli attacks at the nuclear site?
That's not something new. Again, I served, I was ambassador in Argentina, which had two major attacks. One on the embassy, they destroyed the Israeli embassy, literally. The whole building collapsed, and they destroyed the community center of the Jewish community, which like 85 people dead. So I don't feel unsafe here. I think that the threat of Iran does exist, and we have to be alert all the time. But I don't feel that here it's any safer in the streets of Paris or in the streets of the city in New York that had the state of New York. They had a terror attack last year. Iran is going to keep trying to hurt us, and us I mean Israelis and also American. I think, unfortunately, we have to deal with this threat. But I refuse to be scared. I think that, and that's something really Israeli. I mean, you have a bomb attack, and the next day everybody goes back to normal as much as possible. I mean, if you had a family, friend or a family member killed, it's difficult to get back to normal. But people force themselves to do that because the best way to do is to go back to life.
So as somebody who's had a career 20 plus years in the foreign affairs, how's the integration been for your family going from Israel to Dubai?
The truth is really, really easygoing because my family has. I've taken them all over the world, so they're used to going to different places and knowing. And I thought that we would have to learn Arabic, but you don't. Here, everybody speaks English, as much as in I don't know, in Washington. So it hasn't been really difficult for them to adapt. My kid speaks. She's 1.5 years old. She speaks Portuguese because we speak Portuguese at home. I'm Brazilian. My wife is Brazilian too, and she speaks English at the kindergarten. And she'll learn Hebrew when we get back to Israel. Eventually.
So we were talking before everybody came on. What languages do you speak?
Well, I speak, my mother tongue is Portuguese, so I speak Portuguese and all the Latin, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French, and I speak English and I speak Hebrew, so that would make six languages. But that's very common in Israel. I mean, that's, it's nothing extraordinary. Everybody speaks a lot of languages in Israel.
So what's daily life like for you on your job, what you're doing there, and what it's like just to live there?
My job is to open doors and establish relationships. That's what diplomats do. So that's what I do all day. I map, the different segments of society and just go out and reach out to people. And it's a learning process because here, everybody from the government, you have to go to the foreign ministry. I have to make a note in Arabic, which I don't speak. So it's a challenge every time to get somebody to translate and write. And then I also do the same for businessmen and also for civil society. So I spend my day running after people basically and sitting with people and learning. At this stage, I'm learning and trying to put things together. So I talked to the Minister of Education. I said, okay, let's talk to the Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, and bring them here. I talked to the health minister, so we're bringing 10 days a team from our health minister to talk about vaccination and all the procedures so we can, standardize a little bit. So that's my day. I spend my days and meeting very nice people, very interesting people mostly. I love my job actually. It's a good job.
You know, in many ways, you're in a startup. You know, when you were in Brazil or you were in Argentina or Washington, D.C., those were established, you know, consulates and embassies. Here you are, you're the first, you're creating whatever you're creating there. You must feel very proud about that.
Yeah, yeah. But I like those kind of challenges. I mean, it's, you know, in São Paulo, actually, I opened up the consulate. The consulate was closed for 12 years and the government decided to open. So I wanted to be, because I was born there. So it was a big, long fight, legal fight, because I couldn't have immunity because I was also a citizen of Brazil. So after they negotiated, in the end, the ministry agreed, and I opened from scratch. It's like building a, you know, finding a building, getting staff, everything together. So I'm used to this, and I like it. It's better this way.
Very good. Some questions have come in. Do Jews moving to the UAE integrate by learning Arabic? Are you finding that Israelis going there for business purposes are more increasing their desire to learn Arabic?
I think I haven't met yet a Jew that speaks fluent Arabic here. You don't need, you really don't need. I mean, Dubai is a city that only 10% are Emirati, 40% are Indians, which don't speak Arabic anyway. I mean, they speak all the 200 different languages that they speak in India. And you have Philippines, you have Italians, you have, so no, I don't, you know, today I met the first Jew that, Rabbi Abadi, that's a rabbi that actually was in New York. You know, he was the rabbi of the Safra synagogue in New York. And he was hired because he speaks Arabic. And I actually asked him, I said, you know, he's from Lebanon. He left Lebanon, he was 15. So, and he said the truth, I don't use Arabic here. I used much more Arabic in New York when I was than here because everybody speaks English. So no, there's no, Jews don't come here to learn Arabic. And also the Arabic of the Emirates is also spoken, it's very different, I'm told, from different Arabs. You know, they have a dialect that only if you live here you can understand. So people wouldn't have a, you know, point in coming here to study Arabic.
Interesting. So you talk about the warmness, I'll use that term, of, you know, the Emiratis wanting to come to Israel, Israelis going there. Do you think that this will rub off on the Jordanians and the Egyptians, where, you know, for all these years it's really been very much a cold peace? And just curious if you think you'll see an uptick in, you know, people going between those countries.
I think I do, and that's what excites me here. I really believe that if this goes, you know, well in the next years, I think this is going to spread like a virus. Because I see, for instance, in Bahrain, you know, a small country next to the Emirates. I was there, I visited there, and Bahrain is a country with 60% of the population is Shiites, you know, many Iranian. And again, you see the same atmosphere. I mean, I was received there as, you know, as a friend, and I'm not even serving there. I mean, they just knew that I was an Israeli diplomat. I think that this kind of, when people see that this is going to bring fruits to both Emiratis and to Israel, I think that they're going to change the idea. You know, you're talking about Egypt. Egypt has so many deep infrastructural problems. I mean, they have a population that it's young with a high level of employment. If they had, you know, if they would cooperate more with us in the technological, they would be somewhere else. And I think this awareness will come to them, I hope. And we see already the difference. For instance, Saudi Arabia permitted already all those flights that are coming, including El Al, Emirates, Fly Dubai, they fly over Saudi Arabia air territory, which is, for them, was a big, you know, change. So that's the first one. I think that, you know, Israeli companies are already going into Saudi Arabia work and using Dubai as a hub for that. So I expected this to your question. Yes, I think that this is a dynamics that is going to influence the whole region, the Gulf and maybe the whole Middle East.
Well, let's hope so. I got two questions that are kind of contradictory to each other, to one another. Is the UAE risking blow? So I'm going to ask them both so you can hear them. Is the UAE risking blowback from the frontline Arab states because of the relationship with Israel? And the other question was, who's next in line to join the Abraham Accords and the timing?
I don't think if they are taking a risk, of course, because there's a lot of Arab states still, and mainly Iran, which is not an Arab state, but let's put it, it's a neighbor here, that are not very happy with this. The Palestinians are very, very unhappy with this. A delegation of the Emirates was going to the mosque Al-Aqsa, and they were stoned and they had to run away. I heard this personally from the guy that happened. They're very angry, but I think that the Emirate people are determined, to follow this path that their leadership decided, and they just say, the hell with it. And then we decided, we think this is good for our people, we go ahead. And I'm sure that eventually, I connect to your last question. I think that people realize that this is only for the best of the region and for all the people. And I hope that the international geopolitics will permit that, but because sometimes not the will of the people is superpower is going around. But I think that I really believe that this is going to happen. That this is going to influence, and the Emiratis are going to be, and the next one, it's difficult to say, but we are working on many other countries here to convince them that this is worth for them.
I'm just curious, as a follow-up, when you're working with other countries, what role is the United States playing currently?
The United States is our closest ally. That's, needless to say, because of many reasons, the Jewish community there and the shared values that we have. So it's like the first person that I came here the next day that I wanted to see, it's my counterpart, the American Consul General. And then needless to say, he helped me quite a lot in knowledge and etc. So because of this shared interests, I think we trust the Americans and also the Canadians a lot to help us out, because we think the same, we share the same values, we see the world in in the same, we use the same glasses, so to speak. The democracy, the freedom of the right of people to be whatever they want to be. So we work together in many fields, and it's quite. I think that there's a very strong relationship that, and they do help us in any way they can. Regardless of what administration is currently in the White House, it's something that goes much deeper than that.
Great. So you told me before everybody got on the call that you're allowed to be in a post for up to 4 years. So perhaps you'll hope to be where you are for 4 years. If we have this phone call 4 years from now, 2 years from now, what do you want to share with us? What does success look like then?
Well, the success, it's difficult to measure success in my job, but I think in this case, in the Emirates, that one, the number of business relations that we had, and already we had in this 7 months about $800 million of business done, which is quite a significant number. If we do this multiplied by 5, 6, I'll call that a success. If the numbers of flights, keep raising, Emirates, we have now, in about, when Israel opens up completely, we're going to have Emirates, we're going to have El Al, we're going to have Fly Dubai, we're going to have Etihad, and a Hungarian company, a low-cost Hungarian company, so if these flights are full with people coming back and forth, I think that's going to be a success. But I don't know, if I feel at home here, more and more, I think this is also a success.
Nice. So a couple of last questions. based on what you just shared, what's the most intriguing opportunity in Dubai for an Israeli or a Jewish individual? Is it getting involved in tourism? Is it on the high tech end? Like, you know, if you were the consultant for an individual, say, hey, you want to get involved, here's a great opportunity. What would you suggest? What would you suggest?
I think it's limitless, really. You can do whatever you want here. You can be whatever you want, and nobody really cares if you're Jewish and now Israelis. Now you have Israelis working here, and we have even in the English newspapers just hired a Israeli journalist. It's a woman that lives in New York, and she was hired as a journalist. You know, you see Israelis in position, doctors. We have many Israeli doctors that are already established here living. I can't say one field that maybe to run for office. I mean, they wouldn't take an Israeli here, but other than that, the doors are open to everybody, really.
Going back to global politics, somebody asked, where's Russia in all of this? And what role do they play?
I don't think they were very happy with this relationship. You know, it's because it really rattles the balance of power here. The Russians are invested in Syria. They have strategic interest there. They have the biggest naval base in the Mediterranean. It's in Latakia, which is a military base. So they play a very, you know, they have good relations with us, very good relations with us, but they let Iran do up to a point activities in Syria. But on the other hand, they permit us to go there and fight the Iranians when we have to. So they do a very delicate game. And this here, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna rattle the boat a little bit, because if this agreement starts to grow and other nations will join, I think this is going to be a very unpleasant situation for them, because it's our influence and the American influence and the Western world influence too. But I don't think they're going to do, you know, any drastic movement here. So I hope.
So Ilan, any final comments you want to share with the Portland Jewish community?
You know, just inviting you and everybody else, if you want to come here, I'll gladly receive you. You know, I've received many delegations from the US when I was in Argentina, and so I have very close friendship with all the Jewish institutions, you know, in the AJC and the David Harris and the APAC too. So actually AJC is considering opening an office here. So I invite anybody who wants to come, and that's it. And meet you here.
Well, Ilan, we look forward to meeting you there. I know you've had a very long day. It started at 5 a.m. this morning, your time, and now it's almost midnight, your time. So thank you for sharing with us. We wish you only continued great success. I hope you and your family are well. I know you have a baby on the way, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
All good health to everybody. And you're welcome to come to Portland anytime you'd like as well.
Thank you very much. And Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach. That's the point. Huh?
Let's enjoy Yom Ha'atzmaut. We also have a special Yom HaZikaron program coming up here in Portland as well this week. It's one of those, you know, part of the Yoms that we talk about. But Ilan, we're grateful. And Matan, I know you're not on the screen, but I want to say thank you to you and your efforts at the Consul General in San Francisco. We appreciate all that you do to help us here. And to everybody who was listening, thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Ilan, be well. Thank you.
Bye. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.